Hi, everyone. I tried to make a point about Star Wars and I tried not writing out my whole script, which meant I went on a lot of tangents. So go watch Just Some Guy's video roasting The Last Jedi because I forgot to talk about that and I was trying to remember it the whole time. And trigger warning, this is a whole bunch of random thoughts on Star Wars, but I think there are the gems of a couple interesting ideas buried in here. Summa trigerum, summa tangentum, summa spoilerum. Here we go. Hi everyone, number one Marmaduke fan here. I've been noticing that both Uncle Ethan Van Sciver and Diversity in Comics have been talking about Star Wars topics more and more recently. And I mean, like everybody, I'm kind of a Star Wars buff. I think the difference between you being a Star Wars buff and being a person who doesn't care about Star Wars that much, I bet it has something to do with the age you were when you were first exposed to Star Wars. So I'm one of those kids who watched and rewatched Star Wars when I was 6, and I've always kind of carried that magic with me into adulthood. So Star Wars is a thing I'd like to talk about, but since I just have not bothered to see what is it? The Last Jedi. I can't even remember what its name is. It sort of felt like I don't have anything to say because the new movies are out. I haven't bothered to see them. The people who've said it's a bad movie, they've convinced me. They've won that argument. And if it comes on cable and I'm washing dishes, I'll go ahead and watch The Last Jedi on cable while I'm washing dishes. But I'm not going to pay for it. However, Diversity in Comics has just posted a interesting topic. It's a topic I've heard lots of Star Wars fans talking about, and I've got a perspective on it that I haven't heard anyone quite touch on it from this angle. So I think it'd be worth throwing in to even kind of an old hat Star Wars debate, which is Team Empire versus Team Rebel. And Diversity in Comics makes a case for why he's Team Empire. And if you're not familiar with this debate, you might think, what? Why would anyone support the Empire in the Star Wars movies? They're evil, they blow up planets. And this is actually a really old hat debate. The earliest I can remember reading anything about this was an article by Jonathan Last for the Weekly Standard, a sort of neoconservative publication and website, way back in 2002, almost kind of like early internet prime days. And he wrote The Case for the Empire. And this was at least my first exposure to the idea of someone seriously making the case that the better form of government would be the empire, not the rebellion. And then with the new movies, with the benefit of hindsight, we can see that the rebellion didn't accomplish much. 20 years later, the resistance and the dredges of the empire as the First Order are still at war with each other. Anarchy created nothing but decades of strife and war for the galaxy. And that kind of, in a sentence, is the case for the empire. They provide, whatever evil stuff they do, they provide law and order for everyone. Now, I haven't written a script for this. I kind of famously have a tendency to go off on long tangents, but I have a couple little notes in front of me to keep me on tangent, to keep me on topic, so I don't go on for 30 minutes about, I don't know, My Little Pony or something. But I guess my point is, my head is Team Empire, but my heart is Team Rebellion. And the angle I have on this that I haven't heard anyone talk about is the fact that there is a Team Empire, that there are tons of fans who legitimately support the Empire and believe that the Empire is the better form of government than the Rebellion. Is that a failing on George Lucas's part as an artist and storyteller? Is that a success on George Lucas's part? Or was it sort of a case of accidental brilliance? And my take would be that this is a case of accidental brilliance on George Lucas's part. I don't think he had any intention for people to resonate with the Empire and support the Empire, but the fact that he's a pretty good storyteller and he can make really good movies meant that he was able to sublimate his political message enough and tell a story, and people are resonating with that story. And Team Empire is proof of the passion of people who love the Star Wars world. So let me frame this a little bit of a different way. So there's a Team Empire and there's a Team Rebellion, but why isn't there a Team Sauron in the Lord of the Rings fandom? Why isn't there a Team Voldemort in the Harry Potter fandom? Harry Potter, infamously, these are the kinds of stories that SJWs pull from and say, everyone I disagree with, you're Voldemort, plus the evil empire, plus the capital from the Hunger Games. But so with all of these Harry Potter fans, why isn't there some kind of legitimate debate within the Harry Potter community over whether Voldemort is actually someone who provides a good vision of government or not? And the reason I think that is because I think George Lucas sort of slipped up a little bit on including his political message in his art. Now, I haven't seen confirmation of this from George Lucas himself, but I've seen over and over again, and I believe it, the popular theory that the Ewoks were supposed to represent Vietnamese communists, and the evil empire was supposed to represent the American military. And if you look at the Return of the Jedi in that light, and if you look at the whole original trilogy, that sort of changes the tone of the trilogy. Luke Skywalker fighting the Empire becomes sort of an SJW fighting the American Western empire, essentially. The radical Marxist types will literally describe America as an evil empire like the Roman Empire of old. And this is where I think SJWs resonate with the Star Wars films, and they project themselves onto these characters. But here's what I think is the accidental brilliance of George Lucas, is that even if you look at the Empire and say, yep, they provide more peace and stability for the galaxy than the Rebellion, even a conservative can admire the Rebellion, because a conservative looks at the Rebellion and they see the American Revolution. They see the spirit of the American soldiers fighting for independence against the evil empire of the British Empire. An SJW can resonate with George Lucas's story because they identify themselves as the opponents of conservative right-wing fascism. So they project the evilness of the empire onto Republicans or the right or classical liberals, pretty much everyone to the right of Antifa. They project that sort of fascism onto them, and they project themselves onto the rebellion trying to destroy or blow up the patriarchal empire. So I'm really interested to see what Diversity in Comics has to say about why Star Wars isn't SJW, because I think you can make that case. But Star Wars, even since George Lucas's day, I think has had a sort of hippie vibe to it, even the Force kind of being somewhat of an Eastern idea. So my whole point, though, is because George Lucas is a good storyteller, even if he was an old hippie, he was able to take those political views and tell a story. And because he was able to tell a story, even political ideologies, which might be the target of his criticism. If you were for the war in Vietnam and you were kind of on the Hawks side of the argument, the conservative foreign policy side of the argument, you can still freaking enjoy the Star Wars movie. And I think that's the brilliance of Star Wars. It's Saturday morning cartoon kind of stuff. How do you know that Darth Vader is evil? Because he's 6 foot tall and he's picking up people and throwing them around with the Force. And how do you know the Empire is evil? Because they blow up planets and it looks spectacular. And even if mentally, this is why I say my head's with the Empire, but my heart's with the Rebellion. Even if mentally I am cheering, I think that the Empire provides more peace and stability for the galaxy. My heart cheers for the Rebellion as they blow up the Death Star because it's so freaking cool, and you're so invested in the rush of the movie. Star Wars is a good movie. I think all the problems for the new movies stem from the fact that Star Wars is a good movie, but it's not a good novel series necessarily. And I'm not saying that all the expanded universe novels are bad. I'm saying that the beauty of Star Wars is that it's simple, very pure ideas. Luke wants to be a hero. He wants to go on an adventure. Ben Kenobi wants to raise him to be a great warrior. In contrast to something like Lord of the Rings. Now, I think I've read Lord of the Rings, the books, once in my life when I was 13. I somehow had the patience to read those books when I was 13. And every time since then, I've tried to read Lord of the Rings, and I peter out and just go watch the Peter Jackson movies, because those are very dense books with a lot of heavy language. But the morality of Lord of the Rings is very different from George Lucas's morality, which is why I think there is no one who can seriously make the argument that Sauron did nothing wrong. That you just can't. It's almost like there's something inhuman about Sauron, where anyone of any political ideology, you can see who's in the right. That Sauron is waging a war of aggression. He's trying to force all life to essentially be his slave, and the people fighting against Sauron, they are sovereign nations. They have a right to rule themselves. So everyone's sympathetic to the armies of Gondor and Middle-earth fighting against Sauron. You know, people debate about hawks, whether the eagles should have carried the hobbits or something, or they'll debate about Tom Bombadil, but no one debates whether Sauron is a good guy or a bad guy when they talk about Lord of the Rings. No one debates whether Voldemort is a good guy or a bad guy, because J.K. Rowling, even though she's probably, I don't know, sort of a neoliberal, sort of center leftist type, she clearly told a story where there are themes of liberty and freedom, and where Voldemort isn't just an alt-right Nazi, but he actually has an ideology which he's legitimately Nazi-like, because he has an ideology and he manipulates people. He doesn't even really care about the sort of mudblood. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going on my tangent. I said I wouldn't. Okay, I already made the point. The point is that Harry Potter works. The reason Harry Potter resonates with so many people is that it's got a simple idea of good and evil, and it commits to the bit. The evil people are legitimately evil. The good guys are legitimately good. And I think a lot of the young people who read that book miss sort of the themes of liberty in it, and they just pick up on the sort of surface level good and evil. So they look at someone like Betsy DeVos, being appointed Secretary of Education, and they say, oh, she's just like that bad person from Harry Potter. But they miss really obvious things, like Lord Voldemort being against the liberty of parents to educate their children, and Betsy DeVos being for the liberty of parents to educate their children. So the reason I wanted to talk about this is it sort of gets to the point of what can Star Wars do next? And I don't know. It may be screwed forever, barring a barring a sort of soft reboot or a hard reboot. I don't know what they can do with it anymore at this point. I think the natural progression would have been something along like the expanded universe line, where a new threat emerges, and then the remnants of the Empire and the remnants of the Rebellion have to work together against a new threat, or to bring in Admiral Thrawn. Oh, I guess. Dang it, this is a tangent video, guys. I'm sorry. I didn't want to do a whole bunch more Suma tangent videos, but I want to tell you a little story about my older brother, and it kind of illustrates, I think, the appeal of Star Wars that might be missing from the new movies. And then I want to have a conversation with you guys in the comment section about Star Wars, because, you know, this is sort of an old hat debate, but with the new movies having come out, that sort of added a little bit of fresh spin to it. So my story about my older brother is when he used to narrate to me stories about cartoons I wasn't allowed to watch. So I wasn't allowed to watch The Simpsons. So he would tell me the story of Simpsons episodes, and he was a really good storyteller. So he'd act out the characters too. So decades later, when I went and watched some Simpsons episode, I would have my brother's voice, his way of telling the story in my head. And I was kind of disappointed, because for years I had these reference points of stories my brother told me. And one of the stories he told me is he would read the Star Wars Expanded Universe novels, and he would sort of tell me the story of what he was reading in the novels. And he would tell me the story of Admiral Thrawn. And I'm going to go pick up the comic adaptation, #MoveTheNeedle, of Thrawn from Marvel Comics, because even though I haven't read the original novels yet, my brother's telling of that story is so compelling. Here's a guy in the Empire that is sort of racist towards humans. They don't like funny colored or funny looking aliens, who, because he is so brilliant, is able to rise in the ranks and serve the Empire. The only alien who became an admiral in the Empire, I think. So I think that the Disney Star Wars movies have just missed the chance to court these fans of the novels by, they didn't have to adapt the novels, but just, I don't know, bring enough ideas from them that the fans of the expanded universe could feel like some connection to the material, rework it a bit so it works better as a movie. But I've kind of just given up entirely on new Star Wars, but I may actually go back and read some more expanded universe stuff now as a way of kind of reliving some of the old glory of Star Wars. But I guess to restate the thesis that I said and then lost because I went summa tangentum, I think that the fact that people debate about whether the Empire is good or bad is something of a failure on Lucas's part, that he wasn't able to tell a story where his political message really rang home and where everyone can see that, of course, the rebellion is good and of course the Empire is evil, but it was accidentally brilliant because then a whole swath of Star Wars fans could have these interesting debates and resonate with someone. Oh, I got my point. I got the point I lost from my train of thought from going summa tangentum. So Matt Jarboe has made this point. He's Team Empire, and he'd wear a Team Empire hat. But then when the Empire become Nazis, suddenly this gets really awkward. It's one thing to say, I'm Team Empire. It's another thing for Disney to say, the Empire are Nazis. Now buy these hats with the Empire logo on it. Why? Are you saying that I should buy Nazi paraphernalia? So I think this is a big fat problem for the new Star Wars film is, there was always the Nazi-like aspect of the old Empire characters. They'd wear those gray uniforms and march around and, fly around big machines. They had the optics of that. But the Empire of the original trilogy are Saturday morning cartoon villains in an awesome Saturday morning cartoon world. And the First Order of the new movies is very transparently just Nazis in space. And once it becomes that, it becomes harder to kind of be invested in them as cool, fun supervillains for the heroes to vanquish. I think that Disney sort of shot itself in the foot a bit. So sorry guys, I said I wouldn't. I'd try not to do more of these summa tangentum videos. It ended up being that even with my notes, but chat with me. What do you think about my thesis of George Lucas being accidentally brilliant with how he portrayed the Empire in the original trilogy? I do think I would come down on the position that this is a weakness on George Lucas's part, and I think that is shown in the prequel trilogy as well. Oh, the moment from Revenge of the Sith when Anakin says to Obi-Wan Kenobi, from my perspective, the Jedi are evil. And then Obi-Wan Kenobi says, only a Sith will deal in absolutes. And it's such a ridiculous moment because Obi-Wan Kenobi has just made a moral absolutist statement and he's attacking Anakin Skywalker for having black and white thinking. I think that George Lucas is someone who's always had sort of maybe a tortured, kind of a difficult morality. It's difficult for him to get his morality into movies. And I think the failure of the prequels illustrate that problem. It was somewhat present even in the original trilogy that everyone loves. In contrast to that, J.R.R. Tolkien had no problem putting his worldview into a series of novels. Maybe the most significant moral problem for J.R.R. Tolkien's world is, do the orcs have souls? Did they commit genocide against the orcs after that? And J.R.R. Tolkien took that topic seriously. I'm doing it again. All the tangents, summa tangentum. It's not just an in-joke. This really is a summa tangentum channel. So I'm going to stop it there before I end up talking about how that one episode of My Little Pony where they show up at the town with the equal marks, that's like the best cartoon ever, and I want every single millennial to watch that because it's so anti-communist and it rocks. Yep, I'm definitely not going to go on a tangent about that. I love you guys, and I catch you later.